Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting, Circular Green Cities. Today it's the day of sustainability here in the Netherlands. It's an initiative that we take since 2008 and mainly in educational institutes. So we are celebrating this. This meeting, Circular Green Cities, is organized by the province of Flevoland, Aeres University of Applied Science, Floriade and Floriade.digital, and the city of Almere. And we are hosting also a hybrid symposium of this meeting. My name is Xander de Bruyne. I'm a program manager of Floriade Expo 2022. And actually we are here at the site of Floriade, which is a horticultural exhibition that will take place from starting on 14th of April till 9th of October 2022. And so it's all about, the main theme of this exhibition is growing green cities. It will be a space of 60 hectares here, 2 million visitors in this half year of time. And it will be, after the Floriade, it will be a residential area as a legacy. And related to this topic, circular green cities, it's, you could consider it a field lab. So Floriade is a field lab with Almere, the municipality of Almere, on a journey towards the best practice of a green city. And so that's what we will discuss today. It's all about radical greening of urban areas. Currently with climate change, but also with all kinds of actions that are necessary. We need to mitigate through a transition towards a circular economy and as well as radical greening of urban areas, and that will be the topic of today. Today, some beautiful presentations of practices from, among others, Prague and Singapore. And the objective for today is that we will inspire, so it will be really knowledge sharing between different cities. Of course, we will reflect also, so we have some time for interaction, also with our online audience. And afterwards, we will also take this into consideration for next meetings that we will organize on our way to Floriade and during Floriade. So today we have a couple of speakers. We will start with Gideon Spanjar. He is Professor Innovation Green and Urban Space at Aeres University of Applied Science. Afterwards, we will have Wojtek Wozecki. He's an expert in the field of circular economy with a track record of successful envisioning and he will discuss, among others, Prague. After his presentation, we will start with Agnieszka Osiewska-Guizzo. She will present, among others, about Singapore, and she has a PhD in landscape architecture and urban ecology, and she is a founder and president of NeuroLandscape. And after her presentation, we have a question and answer session. So online, also people that are in the, please take the opportunity to ask questions in the chat. After that, we will have a lessons learned from Paula Huiding. She is, among others, landscape designer and also responsible for urban greenscaping, as you could say it like that, in the municipality of Almere. And we will close with a wrap-up by Gideon. Let me start with introducing Gideon. He will present the first presentation about rewilding stepping stones, a really interesting topic. And again, he is Professor Innovation at Green Urban Space at Aeres University of Applied Science. And he is also conducting research on rewilding cities and bio-based building materials, urban microclimates, and promotion of human well-being and future-proofing of cities. He is, among others, also advisory board member of the Praxis Innovation Center Circular Economy, also named as PRICE, which is a program in the municipality of Almere, specific practicing on this topic. Gideon, I would like to introduce you and give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I would like to give you a short presentation describing well, the crisis we are facing today. Just very short, of course, we suffer from great biodiversity loss, but it's not too late to reverse it or to stop it, if you like. At the same time, through the ages, temperature is rising, especially the last decade, and it doesn't matter which scenario it's going to be very hot in the cities, and we need to adapt to a changing climate. So looking at those two challenges, like first the climate mitigation, reducing CO2 emission by working towards a circular economy. And the second challenge is adapting to a changing climate and also working on biodiversity restoration. And to do that, we need to work towards rewilding cities again to combat heat, for example. So two challenges combined. We combine them in the project Rewilding Stepping Stones, a small project here in Almere I would like to describe and discuss with you. Well, first, here you see Almere with the city center over here. And the green corridors, they go through the city, but they don't actually enter the city center. But overall, of course, Almere is quite green, and there are a lot of opportunities to rewild this city. Here you see the city center and also the percentage of green around it and in the center, and you see there's, well, not a lot of green spots over here. So this is really a challenge, also because you have all those different functions you need to integrate in your plans. Just some very short history about Almere. In the 70s, 80s, Almere was growing really fast. The city was rapidly expanding. Streets were planted with fast-growing tree species. And that's actually a problem today, because we need to cut them out. And how can we use the wood and give them a nice new purpose? COVID-19 paradox. There's a need for green for mental health. As you can see on the left, like in the Netherlands, as in many other countries, the parks within the city boundaries, as well as outside, sometimes they were closed, shut down because they were too popular and people couldn't keep the 1.5 meter distance. So it really showed us that we need to start greening our cities. And at the same time, as I already discussed with you in Newtown, Almere, we have to cut those fast-growing trees on a large scale. And how can we use the wood and give them a new meaning? Another COVID-19 paradox. COVID-19 has a big impact on the public spaces, especially in the city centers, in the shopping streets. Shops were closed down. And what you also can see on the right, that during heat waves, the visitor numbers in shopping streets, they dropped. So in other words, you can see the relationships between climate change and the economical impact it has, and also on our whole society. So COVID-19 creates the momentum to bring nature back in the city and repair our ecosystem. We have some questions in this project where we started with how can we use bio-based and recycled materials and plant it with native species, those stepping stones I'm going to discuss with you, to encourage nature to return to the city center, and how can we implement nature-based solutions in outdoor space with those existing multiple functions like in those shopping areas. So the aim of this project was to activate communities to initiate a change for more social ecological resilience. And we use a combination of different methodologies. For instance, the urban ecosystem services model, just to see what are the benefits from the ecological functions and processes we are going to create. And of course, we're not doing it alone. Aeres is working together with some other universities, like in the United Kingdom, with the University College, and also a lot of partners who are present today, like the Floriade, the municipality of Almere, and also the makers, where we work together with them on creating those rewilding stepping stones in the city. And we do that. We started with making those prototypes. We are full in the process of making them, and because we believe like the transition towards a bio-based economy is not something you can actually do from today to tomorrow. It takes time. So we are investigating how can we actually use mixed plastics, creating building blocks to create those stepping stones. And of course, in combination with native plant species. We looked at another prototype we are making at the moment with an artist, local artist, where we use the felled urban wood from the city to make a new, nice prototype, and also see how it can connect to human well-being, and also to make this public space more attractive. And we also look at a third prototype, and that's actually recycled timber from the Upcycle Center. We all dump a lot of timber from our gardens, houses. We bring it to our Upcycle Center, and how can we use this material again? So this is also linked to the Green Carpet strategy of the municipality, a customer journey from the train station to the Floriade, which will start in April next year. We have all different small squares in between them, and we focus at the moment, at the end of the promenade, to make some improvements by creating some prototypes of rewilding stepping stones. And as you can see on the map, this is actually a heat stress map. You see it again in the city center. It's all red, which indicates heat stress in the center. So we need to start greening it to create a more thermally comfortable space, like the promenade. So here you can see the location. At the moment, the municipality is creating an information center of the Floriade over here, but at the moment it's a kind of no man's land. You just don't want to spend time over here. You just want to go very quickly through it to another space. So it has some potential, let's call it like that, to make improvements. We asked Windesheim students, built environments, to work with us and create some prototypes for us. And they started with making some sketches. And they did that based on the user survey they carried out of 31 respondents they asked of the city Almere. And what they actually found out that the people said, well, the city center, it's not that colorful. We want to have more colors in it. We want to have much more green as it is right now. And we would like to have more, well, a kind of warm feel and look using more timber to give it more warmth to public spaces. And that's what you can see here, some seating areas combined with green. This is just some examples. I think we have 50 and other ideas. And here you see some nice visuals of the promenade, how it can look like, how you can actually divide and create a kind of inner space where this inner space is separated from the bus lane, of course, for safety reasons. How you can use these timber from the upcycle center, how you can recycle it, and how you can create, well, even within this space, kind of stepping stones of native vegetation. So just some key findings and next steps to consider. Well, there's a great need, according to the users, also based on the user survey, to rewild and greening the city center. And I think we should start tomorrow with that. There are large green spaces near the city to connect people to nature, but the accessibility can be further improved. And some further research questions. There are plenty of bio-based and recycled materials available, and also, of course, native species. But what are the costs and user benefits? So in the next couple of months, we would like to make a cost-benefit analysis just to see what are the additions, what are the benefits, and what are also the costs for the society. And what are the vegetation types? And this is something we struggled quite a lot with, and we would like to work on that for the next year. What are the vegetation types we should use as a reference and key species to focus on in an urban setting of reclaimed land? And we are creating nature where it wasn't, well, on the water, where it wasn't before. How to connect to the large ecological structures and functions if it is in the beginning so divided because of, well, a lack of green. So those two questions are quite challenging, and you can of course say, well, we would like to create delta nature, because if you zoom out a little bit, that's what we should do. So we will have a closer look at that for the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Yeah, perfect presentation. I was wondering, and maybe I can ask you one question, or maybe there are questions here in the audience. Please feel free. We have a little time. One question from my side is: so you are in the research area, and do you consider the environment to test practices with your research as a viable thing?
Well, you already said it, like the Floriade is one big field lab, and that's also how we would like to perceive the city, and working together with different partners like the municipality, the province Flevoland, and also some other partners, and see how it works out, what we actually create, and try to monitor the whole process, and like how effective is this stepping stone in practice, for instance, and try to distillate some lessons learned and improve it further. So yeah, of course, I see it like that, and I hope also to work with students this year to see how it plays out.
Right, yeah. One more question from my side as well is, there's always a lot of things to do about governance, and when it comes to transformation, then governance needs kind of, let's say, an environment. How is that currently established?
Well, there is some room for improvement, okay. and that's actually at the moment where we are looking at and working on a project proposal for 2 years of research, where we can investigate how to make innovation in governance processes. What kind of legislation do we need to change indeed? How can we include nature inclusive in tenders, for instance? So there's a lot of work that can be done. And of course, we also are depending on the government, the national government, to make it happen. But altogether, we can make a start with it.
Very good. There's one more question from the audience.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to outline 1 or 2 elements you really would like to innovate upon in the next 6 months, what would it be?
And if could you repeat the question for?
Yeah, could you repeat it yourself? Because I was also distracted. And
Gives you some time to think. Flip.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity
yeah.
to ask for resources to innovate on one or two topics in the next 6 months, what would it be?
That's a good question. I think I would like to investigate how we can integrate all those different challenges together, and also to experiment small-scale interventions on different places, not only the city center, but also in the residential areas, and how we can combat heat stress, how we can improve biodiversity levels, and how we can also involve the public in this, and see how it can raise awareness, how we can not only about the problem, but also the solution. What are the solutions we can think of to make a difference?
Thank you, and I very much would like to partner on this with you.
Very good. Thanks. We have to proceed now. Thank you, Gideon. I was thinking during your presentation about the pronouncement that we have here in the region at Floriade Expo, also about van Almere kun je leren. It's a Dutch pronouncement, but it's a very, I think, a good pronouncement in the sense that we need to learn from each other. I'm really happy to introduce Wojtek Wosecki as a next speaker. He is, well, you could call him an expert in transformation processes, especially in projects in Central and Eastern Europe. But he has a lot of experience in Scandinavia as well. Good morning, Wojtek. He is currently leading a transition towards circularity in the city of Prague. So, wat kunnen wij leren van Prague, I would say. And he's also co-founder of an NGO called Circle Economy. And basically, you are in the process of exchanging knowledge. Actually, we had you earlier in one of our Floriade dialogues. And so, welcome, Wojtek, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks a lot for having me. It's such a pleasure to join you, at least digitally, from Sweden, from Gothenburg, where I'm currently based right now. I hope you can hear me and that you can see me, because I can't check that, but I'm sure that Xander would say something in case there would be an issue.
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, and just before I start the presentation, I would briefly like to follow the introduction of myself. My name is Wojtek Wosecki, and indeed, I wear a couple hats. So I work with Prague. I'm advising the mayor and the city council on what needs to happen with the transition towards the circular economy in that beautiful city. If you haven't been to Prague, I gladly welcome everyone to come and have a visit. It's beautiful, very old, but it has a lot of challenges towards reaching our carbon neutrality target by 2050. And I talked to you from Sweden, and you might be wondering why. Well, it's because my wife is Swedish, and she didn't want to live in Prague anymore. So we moved here about a year ago, and I'm working together with Circle Economy, which is a global non-profit foundation actually founded in the Netherlands. I am not the co-founder of Circle Economy. I'm the associate representing circular economy here in the Nordics, but also in the Central and Eastern Europe, where we work with cities, regions, nations, and businesses by delivering practical tools and services to reach circular economy together with them. But I am the co-founder of a consultancy NGO in Czech and in Slovakia, which is called Institute of Circular Economy. But I'm not active there anymore. So, but without any further ado, let's jump into what I have prepared for you today, which my presentation is focused on two things. First is the global challenges the cities and our world faces, and that I see as trend-setting in terms of the directions that the municipal administrations are taking. And then in my second half of the presentation, I will share with you the story from Prague and how we tackled it, and what has happened ever since we started that circular economy transition. And this works too, so that's great. But to start with, I would like to share with you my own personal motivation to even dedicate to the topic. By the way, I lived in the Netherlands for several years. I did my master's in Wageningen University, such a tremendous country. But I also learned a lot when I came to Netherlands, that was 7 years ago, about how we treat our resources and what is waste and what's happening with it. And to me, it was mind blowing to realize that we are actually drowning in waste in some parts of the world, literally. This is a picture from Beirut, from Lebanon, where a couple of years ago, the local waste management infrastructure collapsed. And the waste, the municipal solid waste, which is always just a fraction of the total waste that cities or nations or businesses produce, was piling up on the streets. And that, what you see here, that white snake, is a highway with trash 5 meters tall mountain spanning through the whole city. And it took them months to figure it out. But this is just an extreme showcase of what's happening on a global scale with our resources. We're taking them off the ground, we're turning them into products and services, and then we're wasting them. And sometimes when you think of plastic bottle, you know, imagine all that energy and time needed to produce it. You need oil, you need a factory to create a bottle, you need to fill it with water, you need to transport it, you need to sell it. And then when it gets to us, to consumers, we're done with it in 1 minute, and then we throw it away. And often, and in many parts of the world, that waste is even not treated, it's accumulated, you know, in our rivers, in oceans and seas. The better example is that when it gets incinerated or recycled, but it's not given. But it's just an example of the global material flows that we call linear economy, that I personally take as a huge challenge to focus on. And that's also my own personal motivation to do what I'm doing. What's also important to mention is that, okay, I'm trying to swap the slides. Now, okay, that, you know, our world is, it's not only defined by the way we extract and treat our resources, but it's also largely inefficient with working with what we have. And I think cars are a brilliantly sad example of that inefficiency. There was a study made a couple of years back which estimated that about 93% of the car's lifetime in Europe, that we own the car, that we use it, that car is parked and no one's doing anything about it. It's just taking up space. So the cars in Europe on average are being used only 7% of the time of their total lifetime. And that's, to me, a huge inefficiency. That's asking for disruption, because we can't afford this. We can't afford to build stuff, to consume stuff, in order to throw it away, to burn it and landfill it, or to have it standing without any use for so long. We don't have enough resources for that. And there's too many of us. And I think another example of that defines our global economy is the supply chains. We saw how disrupted they got through COVID. And this is an example, and maybe we will know why when we focus on this poor cod fish that was caught at the coast of Britain, shipped to China to be processed, and then shipped back to the UK 1 mile away from the place where it was caught to be sold in a supermarket, because it was 50 pennies cheaper to do so through Suez Canal. And we all know what happened over there a couple months back. And obviously, this is not only meaning that we are stretching our supply chains, we're extracting materials, we're wasting them, we're inefficient what we have, but we're running out of stuff. And we're also destroying our local and global ecosystems, and biodiversity has a lot to do with it. And this is my favorite example from North America. What you see here is the phosphorus and nitrogen flows that are accumulated in cities, that's the red, and in the agricultural land, which is green, because, you know, the phosphorus and nitrogen is in human feces and urine, and it gets flushed down and accumulated in these rivers, and also in as a local fertilizer. And then it gets transported through the Mississippi River down to the Mexican Bay, where basically what's happening, we're fertilizing the whole bay, which causes an eutrophication effect where that fertilizer is liked by plants and algae, and they grow, but they consume oxygen for everything else that was supposed to live there. And that this effect means that nothing else besides the algae and plants can live there. So all the crabs and fish that didn't have the time to escape died, and this dead zone, as we call it, is expanding. And this is an example that's happening in all the major rivers around the world. And it's kind of, again, an example of the linear economy and its impacts on the global ecosystems. Now, jumping back to the next slide, I have to do it with my phone. We see the issue of having a linear economy in place, and I described already what is it and why is it happening. And to me personally, that solution, it's not a silver bullet, but it's one of the major toolkits that I think we should all be using, is circular economy. It's a different approach. It's a philosophy. It's a business strategy. It can be an urban planning strategy of a world without waste, of a world where waste is seen and used as a resource, and where materials flows in perpetuous loops without a loss of quality. And ideally, by doing so, regenerating the local ecosystems instead of destroying them. And you can see that from this diagram, this has implications to the way we source our materials. We should source as little as possible of raw and virgin materials and use already what we have extracted. And the major component of circular economy is design. Actually, there are studies saying that when you think of a product, 80% of its waste, of the impact that that product will have on the planet and the waste it will generate, is decided when it's being designed. So designers have a key role in changing that linear economy. And that applies to the local city administrations as well, especially to them. And then it gets to production and manufacturing, distribution, consuming better and circulating those materials, using them better, reusing, repairing, and then recycling, collecting everything that we do not consume anymore and making it back to the loop. I think that's the nutshell of the circular economy. And now, since this webinar and seminar is about cities, I think cities actually are at the global front of that transition and of the linear economy. And I'll tell you why. It's because right now, about 50% of the global population lives in urban areas. That number will increase. That number will be 70% by 2050. 80% of the global GDP is generated in cities. And also all that innovation and all that great ideas are being created in or around cities. And cities consume about 2/3 of our energy and are responsible for 70% of global resource and emission production. But they only take about 2% of the land that on our planet. Now about the challenges. This is a short mathematical, if you can even call it math, exercise that I would like to run it with you, just so you understand what's happening and what will need to change if we want to have a sustainable life on this planet. We are now almost 8 billion. In 2050, this will be 10 billion. Now, 50% of us live in cities, but in 2050, this will be 70% of us. That means 7 billion of people living in or around cities in 30 years, which means that for every week from now on, for the next 30 years, we will need to build a new city to the size of Houston, Texas, of 2 million inhabitants. Every week for the next 30 years, new city. Imagine all that metal, concrete, steel, glass that we will need to do this. And we only have one planet. And if we do it the same way we always have been, I'm afraid to say that we are toast. And we need a serious redesign of how will we tackle this challenge. Of course, it's important to mention that growth will not happen in Europe anymore. That's going to happen mostly in global south countries, Africa and Southeast Asia especially. But today we're already seeing that cities are facing, and that's coming from my own experience from the Nordics and Central and Eastern Europe, specific challenges that were even exacerbated by COVID. it has to do a lot with budgets. If you look at Prague, we are extremely touristy city. COVID basically meant no tourism, and that meant huge cuts in our budgets because it disrupted the whole industry, from airport to restaurants, coffees, to hotels, to taxi services, to pretty much anything you can imagine happening in a city. So there's not that much money for the transition that we need to see around ourselves. There's also a lack of visions. So our leaders and the bureaucrats responsible for the agenda often don't know what are the challenges that we're facing, or they don't see them as urgent as you and I might. And they also lack a plan ahead. And that's connected with the leadership. Combining with the data complexity, before I think we can control an issue, we need to understand it, we need to measure it. But also we're not really used doing it in the circular economy sphere. When it comes to renewable energy, we know how to now calculate, okay, what will change if we install 30,000 solar panels on our roofs? How much carbon emissions will we be saving? How cheaper or more expensive that energy will get? But that's not the same school of thought. That we're not that far with circular economy and working with data. And that's also blocking us doing that transition rapidly in the scale that we need to see. And a major downfall, I think, it's also the skills and competences of people that should be in charge, because, often many of them were not educated about climate change, about circular economy, but they are still now in charge of their agendas. And we need to work with them and explain and raise awareness and provide new competencies to be able for them to tackle those challenges on their own. And what happened with COVID as well, in Prague, in terms of my own personal thinking, like how to approach the mayor, because before it was enough to say, if we do this, it will save us this many emissions, we'll plant this many trees, people will love it. But now with these major budget cuts, everyone is asking, is there a business case behind it? Can we afford to invest in this? Because that means we won't be able to build a new school or fix this road. That money pile is seriously limited. And we need to move away from only the discussion about like environmental benefits and savings when we talk to the cities, to environmental and economical savings. And we need to find solutions that combine the profitability with environmental impacts, the positive ones. Connected with sustainability, I think we also saw, maybe you remember coming to supermarket, not being able to buy what you were used to buy for the last 20 years during COVID. These supply chains got seriously disrupted, and cities have a huge role in changing those supply chains and making them more local by switching their demand and procurement purposes to a self-sustainable systems when it comes, for example, to food. It's a great example. I think also we need to switch from reliance on raw materials, on supply chains, on EU, to resilience towards our know-how, to our self-sustainability, but also towards the threats that the climate change is bringing, like urban heat island effect that Gideon was talking about, or floods. And that's both part of the same coin that Prague has to deal with on an annual basis. And instead of cutting, I think we need to talk about investing and creating jobs. And now, very briefly, I will share with you the story of Prague. It all started with actually a project called Circular Scan, which we did together with Circular Economy. I was back then running that Circular Economy Consultancy Institute of Circular Economy. And basically what we did was to design and develop a vision for the city of Prague of what does it mean to be a circular city, where to start, what are the key material flows, and what are the key strategies for Prague in order to make that transition happen. We started with mapping our key sectors, and we looked at the impact they have on the emission productions, on jobs creation, and also on the economic added value they create. And based on that, we were able to identify that construction and real estate sector, together with utilities sector, have the biggest impact by far on the emissions, but also on the jobs creation when it comes to construction. And we also thought we need to be closer to the people, and we need to offer them a more sustainable way of running a household. So that's why the third sector that we chose to focus on with the scan was households. We mapped the material flows of these key sectors. So this is an example of the construction sector, which was really interesting because it opened our eyes and it put things into perspective. We realized that maybe instead of talking about plastic straws and plastic bags, why don't we focus on the elephant in the room, which is the construction sector? Because we found out that about 13 million tons of raw materials are needed for Prague to build, and about 3 million tons of waste are produced from this industry every year. And that waste is not really being circulated back the way that we would like it to see. Just to put things into perspective, when we talk about the municipal solid waste that we produce as citizens, that's about 450,000 tons a year. So this is 3 million tons in construction. Our own waste at households, 500,000. So 6 times less. And when we understood our sectors and the flows in them, we were able to define the most tangible strategies. So with construction, we thought we need to start procuring more sustainably. With households, we thought we need to offer people better ways to repair, reuse, and refurbish their household equipments. And with utilities, we thought the biggest opportunity was in closing the biomass loops. So what happened ever since? There's so many more things. I'm afraid I don't have time to run into such depth, but I prepared a few examples for you. So when we come to biomass flows, I think it's pretty common sense in the Netherlands, but believe me, not in many, many parts of the rest of the world. So we started with, first of all, food waste prevention campaign, because the best waste is no waste. So you could see those billboards in the city that you see on the left, saying, buy only what you eat, you will save twice your wallet and also the environment. And there was also a social media campaign. We started collecting food waste at source as the first city in the Czech Republic, and that pilot is now being scaled up to 1/4 of the city. And we started producing digestate that we supply the local farmers with instead of them having to buy mineral fertilizer from Morocco. And we also started.
Wojtek,
Yes.
I have to interrupt first. Could you close in a minute? Or I hate to interrupt, but for the
Of
time
course.
schedule. Yes? Okay, thanks.
So then we also procure sustainable farming practices on 500 hectares of the land that we own as the city. We are moving away from recycling when it comes to consumer goods. So we support Library of Things, zero waste shops. We transformed our collection yards into reuse points. We're doubling our municipal solid waste separation rate. And we're also engaging businesses and local administration in a Circular Prague platform. We are now finishing our Circular Prague 2030 strategy, focusing on key sectors. And these are some of the lessons learned that I wanted to share with you, because you might be dealing with the same challenges at your own location. I think it's important to stick to data. If you can't measure it, you can't control it. I think it's important to have visions and understand the material flows, and based on that, define actions. It's important to get a political buy-in with actionable pilots. It's important to create specialized departments and roles in the municipalities. It's great to be part of local and international networks. Crucial to engage local stakeholders like business, academia, and NGOs in a complex discussion about what needs to happen. I recommend investing in the most systemic and impactful solutions, and circular procurement is a great tool. And my last advice would be just do it. Look at the low-hanging fruit and get started and have fun. Thanks, and sorry for taking a bit more time than I should.
Thank you very much, Wojtek. And again, I hate to interrupt, because this was a great presentation, and also, you know, like a great sharing of experiences from your practice. I would say let's do some questions in our Q&A round, and let's start also with our next speaker. We have Agnieszka Olszewska-Giso. She is basically focusing on another area, more, let's say, on the human well-being perspective of let's say, rewilding cities and getting nature back into cities. I think a very important topic, especially related also to the fact that the natural and built environment and mental health are related. Agnieszka knows a lot about this. She is a president and founder of Neuro Landscape. She has a PhD in landscape architecture and urban ecology from the University of Porto. And she's researcher at Yong Lee's School of Medicine at National University of Singapore. Welcome, Agnieszka.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I hope everyone can hear me well.
Yes, you are really loud and clear in our audience room, and so I would say really interested in your topic, so please present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for invitation for this panel. My name is Agnieszka Olszewska-Guizo, and I'm a landscape architect using the neuroscience tool for the research into urban planning and green spaces. And for the last 5 years, I've been working in Singapore. So today I will talk a little bit about the urban green space design from the Singapore perspective and from the perspective of their new green plan. So as some of you might have heard, Singapore has transitioned from its vision still from the 60s of green city that was called city in the garden towards city in the nature. And it is part of the Singapore Green Plan with 5 pillars to target different things by 2030. It's also aligned with UN Habitat 2030 agenda and the SDG goals. So among these 5 pillars, we've got the so-called energy reset, which is all about quadrupling the solar energy by this time. Then we have a sustainable living target, which is all about reducing waste by 30% and creating turning Singapore into a zero waste nation. Then the green economy, that is all about green jobs and green finance action plan, and resilient future, which is about resilience towards the rising sea levels, urban heat island reduction and mitigation by creating more green facades and urban greening strategies. And then urban farming for food security to cover up 30% of nutritional needs of the nation. But I would like to focus on this first pillar, city in nature, which my research is connected to. So Singapore is transforming itself into a city in nature. And one of the very important premises of that is to intensify nature in gardens and parks. And that could sound a little bit peculiar, so I'm going to jump right into it and explain what it is and how it links to mental health. So in the Natural Parks Boards of Singapore website, we can read that intensifying that nature will enable visitors to benefit from the positive effects of nature on their health and well-being. So we can see that the government official at Singapore, they recognize the huge contribution of green spaces for people, mental health and well-being. This translates to the healthcare costs as well, and it is worth investigating specific solutions and specific strategies to address while designing and deciding about the green network across the city. So actually the research so far shows that the huge part of our overall health, including mental health as well, is our environment. Our environment hugely shapes our health. And it seems that it's actually now a scientific consensus that the urban living increases the risk of developing mental disorders, even by 39% for the anxiety disorders. And this is the result of the meta-analysis. So taking studies from all across the world, and that's the result of meta-analysis. Somehow, urban living is more destructive for mental health than the rural living, outside of city living. So this sheds a light, this puts urban planners and decision makers in the spot to actually redesign, rethink their approach to design green spaces in cities, to design cities and to provide some solutions that could actually work for people to protect from this urban environment impact on their health. But there are gaps in knowledge, and we don't know too much about the mechanisms, specific features and factors of the urban environment that cause the mental health risks occurring there. There is not much causality shown through research. There is no, we know a lot about the negative effects of cities like pollution, noise, and so on, but we don't know much about protective factors and what could actually be promising effective tool to mitigate those the bad effects. We also don't know site-specific context, and each site can be different, each population is a little bit different, and a lot of methodological considerations that we still don't know too much about need to be discovered. So what I did in Singapore with the studies that was funded by NParks and NUS, National University of Singapore. So we recruited 95 participants, representative of the Singapore population, and we collected their self-reports on the mood and pleasantness, their emotions towards selected landscape views at the spot. And we also collected their brain activity patterns with the brain, mobile brain scanning devices, EEG and FNIRS, as well as we corrected for the environmental confounders such as temperature, humidity, noise. And each of the environments was also assessed by the landscape architecture experts for their so-called contemplative landscape scores, which I will discuss a little bit later. So we used 3 sites. First, 2 of them were green sites, officially showing in the master plan of the Singapore as green spaces. The first was the lush urban parks section called Therapeutic Garden, designed 2 years ago with a special consideration to just serve people with mental health disorders. Part of the big public park. The second one was the residential green roof on the top of the garage in the very typical for Singapore residential estates that most of the Singaporean live at, this kind of estates. And the third was the busy downtown with negligible natural elements. So jumping right to the results of the study, when we compared the mood, self-reported mood from before and after the around 30 minutes exposure to these spaces, we could see that only in the first site, the / urban park, the total mood disturbance has dropped from before to after across participants. And this was the statistically significant change, which means it wipes out all the possibility of that was just due to coincidence. We can see that another green space did decrease the tension and anger, one component of the total mood disturbance. However, it didn't translate to the total mood improvement. In case of the busy downtown, we can see the, according to our hypothesis, we can see the decrease in all the components of the mood and the decrease in total mood after the exposure significant across participants. And it is also noteworthy here that in that kind of studies it's actually quite difficult to demonstrate mood improvement. It's much easier to demonstrate mood decrease. What about brain activity then? So we measured brain activity with FNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy, that is measuring the levels, the amount of oxygen in the blood vessels in the brain. It scans with the light, scans through the brain vessels, and basically when there is less oxygen in some part of the brain, here for us it was frontal and occipital area, it means that in these regions the brain has lesser processing activity, so it is more relaxed and less strenuous. So when we see here this graph, we can see that in the first site with the lush greenery, the brain was the least strenuous. The second site, it's also green site, the brain was working already and processing much more, and according to our expectation, the busy downtown generated the most difference, the most, let's say, high processing cognitive performance of the brain, which also makes it most tired. So the difference was marginally statistically significant, and it's quite interesting that the reaction to all the spaces when unified across all participants in the same type of exposure, very controlled with environmental factors, were different. We also had a small sample of the individuals with depression, the patients of the clinic, and we looked at their other patterns specifically for depression in the patients. And there is actually a separate paper about to be published just about that, but I just want to mention how this first site contributed, how this exposure to the specific type of natural environments in the city can be promising for the support of the treatment of depression. Because only in that site, the brain of participants, the depressed participants, as you can see on this image, showed this specific pattern desirable in the depression treatment, that is more alpha waves on the right frontal lobes of the brain, that on the left, because usually in their everyday life, in the baseline, these patients have the opposite brain activity, that is left-sided alpha frontal asymmetry. And the same pattern we can see at the busy downtown. So in a way, that therapeutic garden space reversed the pattern that is typical for depression individuals. But what we can tell to the landscape designers and people that are actually deciding about our green spaces in cities. So then we have to break into the specific features of each landscape setting. And at the first site, we had 3 landscape views as presented on this slide. And the residential green space had also 3 different landscape views. Each of them are green, all of them are green, but each of them has a little bit different features of the landscape. And they can be assessed with this tool, contemplative landscape model, that is breaking each landscape scene into 7 categories: landscape layers, landform, vegetation, color and light, compatibility, presence of archetypal elements, and last but not least, character of peace and silence. And the contemplative landscape score is the score from 1 to 6 points attributed to each space based on the average of the scores of the 7 key components. So we had those contemplative landscape scores of each site, and then we also had the brainwave scores recorded from our 95 participants. We specifically looked at the patterns associated with attention restoration, relaxation, and mindfulness. And we correlated this brain data with the data from the contemplative landscape assessment to see how well they correlate, how well this paper-based contemplative landscape model correlates, can predict specific brain reactions of people exposed at the specific landscape scene. And we found that that the contemplative landscape score, the total score, can accurately predict those 4 things. They can predict wakeful relaxation, attention restoration, mindfulness, and valence and arousal, that are components of pleasantness of the subjective view. It did not predict well the attention restoration associated with the beta waves. But a lot of the components show more or less higher correlation with the contemplative, with the different neuropsychological measurements. And based on that, we can create a set of design recommendations for designers, showing them what they should prioritize in their design in order to target the specific brainwave pattern or the self-reported pleasantness of the view. So in a way, this gives a roadmap to design for either healthy brain or just to get more compliments from the public. Here, this graph shows the optimized prioritization plan with all of these components taken into the picture, and seems like the most worthy, the prioritization in the urban context, are the landscape layers, which talk about the comfort of the long distance views and seeing afar. And then character of peace and silence, second most important thing. Then archetypal elements, vegetation, color and light, landform, and compatibility of design. Unfortunately, I can't go very much into detail about each of these factors, each of these features. There's a whole lecture about it, or even more than one. But the conclusions are that the exposure, it's not enough to just put plants in a space. Different green space designs generate different neuropsychological responses. Exposure to certain types of green spaces, and here we're talking about contemplative landscapes, showed the potential for mood improvement, actual change in the brain activity, and potential support for depression treatment. It also showed that the contemplative landscape scores accurately predicted the brainwave pattern connected with wakeful relaxation and mindfulness. So 2 things that are very important for the urban populations, but also their self-reported subjective assessment pleasantness of the scene. An outcome of this kind of design experiment can be a set of recommendations for designers that would, besides their artistic visions and fashion or whatever is on the market, or other inspirations, could also target mental health and well-being in their designs. And this set of recommendations is now going to be implemented by the Singapore National Parks for Indoor City in Nature initiative. That's all from my side. I'm sorry if I took a little bit more time.
Thank you, Agnieszka. It's really interesting research, and as a matter of fact, from here we look at a care institute on the expo site where there will be housed quite a number of Alzheimer patients, starting also in 2022. I'm in contact with the director there, and I'm pretty sure he will be really interested in this topic, because it's not a coincidence that this Care Institute is based here in this growing green urban residential area. So, and I must say it was really interesting to see your conclusions and your research findings. Another thing I was thinking of, on the expo site, there's also a primeval forest. And always when we are there, it's like, I mean, you need to sit there for half an hour and you can start working again in the... Anyway, that was some of my brainwaves regarding to your research. Thank you very much. And I have to say that the presentations will be presented on nectar.exchange. That is our Floriade Knowledge Exchange program and online, let's say, online practices platform. So I have to say that to everyone. With that, we are kind of running out of time, but I am currently now, thank you, Agnieszka, and I would like to ask Paula Houding, Senior Urban Planner with the City of Almere, and she will take us through the future development of a residential area in Almere called Pampas, a new urban development in Almere, and it will be developed in a nature, inclusive and circular way. So it is a lot of findings from our earlier speakers. Paula, I would like to give the floor to you, and maybe you can, you know, like, if there are some questions and that you can reflect on based on our earlier speakers and also your practice here with this new residential area, Pampas, I would say some questions are possible right now.
That will be great. There aren't any questions right now, otherwise I have some questions by myself. And perhaps it will be good to go through my presentation, then we can combine all the questions and reflect on that. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's always a great opportunity to listen to other people that actually are trying to find the same, find solutions for the same questions we have actually in the whole world. And what these events are very special is that the answers to the questions have to be found in different kind of contexts and from different perspectives. That is something that we can use to learn from each other and each other processes. Just a very practical thing, how much time would you like that I use? And because I would like very much to have the opportunity to talk to our audience and answer questions.
You have time until, let's say, 11:50. So, yeah.
All right. I ask that because my DNA is half Italian, so when I start to talk, somebody has to say stop.
I will help.
Good. The area development of Almere Pampas, I'd like to share some of the steps that we are taking on the work progress to the development of this area. And to the ones that don't know the city, the small circle is where we are actually right now at the Floriade. And the area of Pampas is actually in the corner just on the other side of Amsterdam. To make your understanding clear, it's good that you know that this is not a solo work process for this area development. Already in 2013, there have been agreement among the national government, the province, and the municipality of Almere that started a huge and long process to not only to develop the area of Pampas, but actually to set up 8 main strategic lines that Almere embraced in order to actually almost double size of our city in 2015. So it's not only the development of our city, but the accessibility of our city, and don't forget the whole ecological aspect of the area around, which the biodiversity loss is dramatic. So we have actually to restore the quality of our biodiversity and ecology in order to be able to keep growing in our city. One of the strategies that we are using to set up a program of requirement for the master plan of Pampus is trying to rethink about the relationship between nature and human beings. I like very much the scheme of Pedro Passos from an NGO Natura from Brazil. He says there is no way to keep living in cities if we don't understand that people and nature, green and animals, have the same rights. So we have to bring the system in balance. And one of the researches that we are doing to set up this program of requirements for the master plan is trying to understand how we could use the ecosystem service as part of the infrastructure of the new area. So not having the infrastructure underground, not having the infrastructure for mobility and buildings, and then giving some place to nature. No, we want to have nature as part of the function aspects and infrastructure of the area. Regarding the principles of circularity, we understand from other research that we have been following that it's very important to understand what kind of actually solutions we have to find on the different cycles of an area of cities. From long life cycles like infrastructure or buildings, of the way we're gonna design our urban areas, but also don't forget the people are gonna work there, people are gonna live there. So we also have to take into consideration short license cycles in the whole system regarding all the devices, everything getting in the area, everything that shouldn't get out of the area, till actually food. We have in Almere, by the way, a special agenda of food. So for all these different kind of cycles, we are trying to find a strategy to make their based on the principles of circularity and also the relationship between these cycles and the relationship between what is going to happen in the area regarding the scale of the city, the metropolitan area of Amsterdam, the province, and actually you could scale up to Europe. So one of the aspects that we are looking for the good solutions, try to understand what is the right scaling. What kind of solutions we have to search in a neighborhood level? What kind of solutions are much better to be found in a city level, of a regional level, or European level? And we believe that the circle is not the only solution, therefore. We are trying to find the efficiency between the loops between all these cycles. So actually, when people live and work there, how is that related to the cycles of the buildings? How can we build in this area from the perspective of reducing the use of materials from the beginning, from the design, and what kind of materials are there? And if we say we like to integrate nature and the area development, where nature stops are the birds and the trees, or are our buildings part of the nature if we agree that they have to be built with bio-based materials? So what is the range of nature in the area? And we also think, of course, we cannot ignore the whole energy transition. How can we use circularity actually to provide the area of energy and warmth, and also of cooling? So we are set up now different research lines to understand what will be the best energy system for this area, of the combination of different systems of the areas, and how circularity could play a role in that. For instance, using warmth from surface water for the heating for the houses. And that has direct relationship with water retention in the area, but also with ecology. So there is no way to develop an area from one only discipline, one only perspective. And I love the presentation also of Agnieszka that addresses how important is that for the influence of this area for our well-being and healthy. So my idea was during her presentation how we could set up a therapeutic area development using the combination of nature and human beings. That was very short, the strategy that we are using to set up all the research lines in this work agenda that's gonna take 2 or 3 years to find all the possible solutions. We didn't choose for one strategy till now. First of all, we wanted to find out the answer for, we have about 150 questions in our programs, and how to combine actually the solution from one question to 2 or 3 other questions, since the area can just be used for a certain surface. Why we do that? And then I come back to the presentation also of Wojtek. He told us that he's advising actually the city council. And that is my role actually in this work progress. I have to find solutions and possibilities to develop this area in pretty much different ways in order to provide our city council of enough information to make the choices for the program of requirement. So we are not starting this development with a specific vision, in the sense that that kind of solutions should be achieved when we realize this area, but the vision is actually how mainly to use sustainability as a vehicle for development of the area. So the goal is not to achieve 100% circular economy. Circular economy of circularity actually will be a vehicle, a way to achieve actually this area in 2050. We don't do that by ourselves. We have collaboration with the innovation agenda of the Floriade. We have collaboration with Gideon Spaniards. We don't forget our existing city. We have a lot of work to do, first of all, in our existing city. So we collaborate with the program of Almere Central. We have collaboration with the TU Delft and with many other partners, because this is a process that we don't want to do by ourselves. It will be completely idiot not using the knowledge and the experience of many, many other peoples. And saying that, I would like very much to introduce Ingrid Segers to take part of the dialogue together with the others, Wojtek and Agnieszka. Ingrid, just come to join us. Take the microphone, we improvise a little bit. Ingrid Segers is a program manager of PRICE, the Practical Innovation Center for Circular Economy. We have been talking a lot to each other as well the last time. Her program will gonna be launched in November. And her goal is actually to speed up the transition to a circular economy, in my words. And she set up also many of challenges. And she's gonna help Pampus actually to find out many of good solutions. So tell a little bit about your program, And then we're going to talk with Wojtek and Agnieszka and trying to answer also the questions in a group. Could you explain very shortly what your program is?
Yeah, Paula, thank you so much. And thank you for having this opportunity to also introduce PRIZE. As Paula said, that stands for Practical and Practice and Innovation Center of Circular Economy. And we actually want to drive the innovation pipeline on all the challenges Paula just addressed. So can we work together in a very collaborative way and really co-create all the necessary innovation, which ultimately will then end up in a very concrete area called Pampas. And can we also learn from the lessons Wojtek and Agnieszka just learned? I remember the fourth conclusion of Agnieszka was to implement design principles, and Wojtek said 80% of the impact we create is actually in the design stage. That's excellent news, because that's the stage before we have done anything. So if we really start to co-create in that phase and really collaborate, we can then design actually prototypes and complete areas where the impact is not negative, but is even positive on mood and on biodiversity and on heat stress and all those Wojtek horrible scenarios you started with. And can we reverse them around?
I think it will be good to see, do we have questions? Otherwise I have questions by myself, and try to start a dialogue here. Oh, we already have one question. Oh, a micro, yeah.
I hear a lot of collaboration, but to what extent do you collaborate with the citizens of Almere?
That's an extremely good question. And I think that also Wojtek and Agnieszka can answer this question. In the case of Pampas, we're going to start with a participation process. We already talked to the alderman that is responsible for this area. He's very enthusiastic about the way that we set up this program in order to find the solutions. And I just talked to him last week, and we're going to start a participation process to understand what the city would like to have in Pampas. Don't forget, by the way, that there are a lot of work to be done in the city itself, in the existing city. So the process will organize in a way that the existing city will take her time actually to talk to the population, and in the coming 2-3 years we organize all this process also to understand what this completely new area could mean for Almere. And it is funny, I have been working now for 1 year at the municipality, and before the summer we have city talks organized by Almere 2.0. And I said I like to be moderate, so I have the opportunity to talk with people in the city, a city that for me is new. And it was great because it had to be digital. We were in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, but it was great because I could be in the living room of many of people digitally. But people say, regarding the city or the new development, it doesn't matter what we're going to do in the city, there is one clear message. Save green and water in the city because it has a huge quality. They understand that we have to densify the city, we actually have to double size. They understand that we're going to densify, they understand that we're going to build new areas. But there is a clear message from the city, for the ones living here. Save green and water. And as Guido already said, that we have quite a lot of green, considering other cities, but the quality has to be improved, and there's still place to integrate more green in the existing cities. I'd like perhaps to ask to Wojtek, and after that, Agnieszka, because you both advise and work with the local government, city council. Could you explain a little bit how do you do that in Prague and in Singapore? Because will be good to understand in which context you both are doing your work. Doesn't matter who starts. Who would like to start? I say, Wojtek, you were first of your presentation. Could you share with us your experience advising the the city council?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question, and quick answer is that we have a lot to improve in Prague. So much. I mean, and this is where I think Netherlands or the Nordic countries are at the forefront of public participation processes. That's not really the case in Prague, to be completely frank with you. Nevertheless, what's by default when you work in a city or a municipality, what I love about it is that the leaders and the bureaucrats are accessible and directly responsible to the citizens. And if the citizens don't like something, they will knock on your door, they will call you, they will write you an email. So there is a feedback loop that's happening. And of course, we're listening, but it's only to a selected amount of citizens who scream the loudest, unfortunately. But we're trying to turn this around, and um, we have right now when we do these strategies or these pilots, we always like when there's something to announce, we leave it for the public to be able to say and come and share with us what they think. They're also invited to the city council meetings and the city assembly meetings, and they come often to talk. Like last time we had Fridays for Future, the students from the city of Prague telling us about their plans about carbon neutrality, and it's crucial for us to listen to it. But and of course, like most of the things we do, most of the things that I talked about are citizen centric. So we always have that in mind. How do we improve the lives of our citizens by providing better and more sustainable services while maintaining the costs or making it even cheaper, more accessible to them? And there's so many things happening on a pilot scale basis, but when it comes to the structures or the system behind public participation, I really think there's so much to do and so much to learn from specifically the Netherlands and the Nordics.
So actually you say that reshuffling the system could help the municipalities also in the sense of reducing the cost of maintenance, for instance. So you have benefits of reshuffling the system and not only related to sustainability.
Yeah, of course. And this is part of my presentation, that we need to find solutions which help us save money as well or generate new income while engaging the citizens and while offering them more circular economy solutions. And this whole area about reuse, repair, refurbishing couches, chairs, and all the bulky waste, as we call it, offers so much opportunities. So, for example, one thing that is I have high hopes about is that we're gonna create a digital map of Prague called Circular Prague, where everyone who opens it up will see instantly, okay, where is the nearest swap event? Where is a reuse point? Where is a conference or a workshop that I can be part of and learn more about this? And then it will be designed in a way that whoever opens up, I don't know, a zero waste shop can let the admins know, and we will put that on a map. So that map will be constantly larger and larger, based on the bottom-up initiatives that will keep popping up. But that's just a tiny example of so many more things.
Yeah. Thank you. And Agnieszka, we are of course very curious about the condition, the context of work in Singapore, since it's a completely different context we know here in Europe. Could you share some experience of you?
Well, in Singapore, there is also a lot to do in terms of participatory design. And in the previous research project I took part, a biophilic town framework, we ran some pilots of it. Generally, there is already some existing scheme of public participation, and those citizens that want to contribute with their opinions and views, there are ways for them to do that. some of the residents are just not interested and will not be to participate. But yeah, besides that, there is still a problem, and why the participation really matters in the design process is not so much in the context of Singapore, not so much to really gather some ideas from the residents, the ideas for the design, but rather to create a sense of ownership and a sense of place, to make them feel at home and contribute to how the thing will, how the residents will actually look like in some ways. And this was like, this is the knowledge that is coming out from our biophilic town research project that we piloted. We introduced a participation of residents of the new neighborhood that is being constructed now in every stage of the design process, from the start, from the conceptualization process. And yeah, there was gathering of ideas stage where the ideas were not, so the ideas were already like tackled by the designers, but how the public interacted with each other, with designers, and how they kind of started visualizing the new place. This already at this workshop sessions, they already created sense of community among the people, and this we know already from scientific studies, this will create then a sense of community, more inclusive, more safe environment at that neighborhood, and it also improves well-being after all. So this is the approach, and then later the residents were choosing and evaluating which of the proposals they liked the most. And here they didn't really they couldn't really assess it with a like expert perspective, but again, the fact that they were invited to and they participated, it already counted for that like sense of community and sense of well-being that is created already in the design stage.
Okay, thank you. Just to finish, I like to, I have a question to you, Ingrid, actually, but you can.
I'd like to add on your question, what kind of citizen participation or kind of governance leadership do we require? And there is a thought now starting to rise, and actually the youth from the Netherlands just 2 weeks ago wrote a manifest where they ask for benign central leadership. So dedicated vision and dedicated leadership based also on the corona epidemic experience, that we really need to act as one in order to counter the disasters Gideon laid out in heat stress, in CO2 emissions, in biodiversity loss. So there's a rising sense of urgency. Please all act, everyone is needed. In the next decade, and some say we only have 7 years, but let's be positive, to really create a kind of different leadership which makes a huge difference to what we have today.
I think we could stop here talking with this call, actually. There is nothing else to be said. Would you like to wrap up?
No, yeah, well, thank you for that. Indeed, it was a good finalizing words from you. Thank you all for this panel discussion. And I mean, we could talk about this topic, of course, for a longer time, and we will. That's also a kind of a like today we are in this constellation of a kind of a digital dialogue. You are both working from a distance with us and contributing to the dialogue. We have seen the whole digitalization and the potential of digital twinning as a very interesting factor also for sharing knowledge and, well, our field lab, let's say, approach. And for that, I would like to invite Gerrit-Jan here on stage. I hope he is. He's probably. Well, Gerrit-Jan is one of the founders of World Startup, and he will be together also with Gideon and all the stakeholders here, also together with us, Floriade, also with our knowledge exchange program, working on, let's say, the potential of digital twinning and sharing knowledge between, well, let's say, cities like Prague, Singapore, Madrid, Almere, you name it. We have the next years, we will work on that. And, well, Gert-Jan could explain a little bit more about how these developments and what we will do about digital twinning. Go ahead. Yes.
I hope this works. Can you? No, I hope this works well for the audience. No, I have to do it like this. Okay. Yeah. Cheers. Great. So hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today in Almere, and let me start with big thanks to everyone who has made this event possible, and especially Gideon, who is in the middle of all this. And we are very glad to be here. My name is Gerrit-Jan van Veen. I'm a co-founder and managing director of World Startup. And we are a global startup and innovation platform. We are a support organization with an office and most of our team operating in The Hague, the Netherlands. And we serve a community of impact startups across the world. So we offer them a variety of services covering all stages of the typical startup journey, from ideation all the way up to funding support and business development. I'm going to be a little bit, now I would like to talk a lot about what we're doing with our business, but I like to focus on how we, now what happens when we talk about the Floriade in our daily life, in our daily work. And I want to start with two examples. I had the pleasure to be a jury member of a pitch event in Bhutan this week. We ended up there. We worked together with PUM, which is a very interesting organization here in the Netherlands. They send experienced seniors to developing countries or to abroad, and to help them with entrepreneurs in a local setting. It's a really great organization, and we work with them. So we ended up in this pitch competition. 15 startups from Bhutan doing incredible things. Working on circular economy, working on sustainable companies, working on social companies. And suddenly, first there were three things that really struck me. First of all, there were three companies that did something very similar to what Dutch startups are also doing. And they could benefit a lot from the lessons that have been learned here in a slightly more advanced economy, and we could bring these lessons to Bhutan. The second thing that struck me, there was actually one startup, very early stage, was already exporting to the Netherlands. So he was also already doing business here in the Netherlands, and he was very proud of that, of course. And the third thing that happened was, well, I'm Dutch, I'm in a call, people from Bhutan are there, and they say, well, what are you doing with the Floriade? Because you must be involved in the Floriade, out of the blue. And we were having this conversation online in Bhutan about, okay, what are you doing with Floriade? You are Dutch, you must be involved. I said, well, I'm giving a presentation this Friday about how we're going to set up an online platform to engage entrepreneurs worldwide, to engage students, to engage professionals worldwide, to tap into that knowledge that we're going to unite here, that we're going to bring together here at this site. So that's just one example of what is happening in our daily work. And I actually, since I've been working on this topic together with the Floriade, together with Aeres, together with the city of Almere, this actually happens almost on a daily basis. People want to engage. but a team in Bhutan, or a team in Indonesia, or a team in Thailand, where we have where we work together with all kinds of organizations, they don't all have the ability, and they should not have the ability to come over to this wonderful place. The sun is shining right now. It was a little bit dark this morning. But they don't have the capacity to come here and actually the resources, and they shouldn't have to spend these resources. We should be able to provide them an online platform where they can act, where they can interact with each other. So that's an interesting thought. The other thought is that we are actually here on the edge of a neighborhood. What is going to be an expo will soon be a neighborhood, and there's a lot of talking about that. So what if you bring that thought of, hey, we're going to turn this into a neighborhood, what if you bring that to the online world? Because many organizations here at the Floriade are going to create together an online world. Sharing knowledge, doing workshops, giving each other feedback, sharing presentations like we've seen today. And that world is just as interesting to redevelop afterwards as the physical space that we're looking at. And that's, I think, what we are trying to do in the upcoming months, to create a movement and to create an organization together with Aeres, with Windesheim, with the city of Almere, with the Floriade, of course, to capture all that knowledge, to capture that activity, and to turn it into something that might be the best innovation platform a city can have in the future. That's what we're going to do. And if you're interested to join, let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Gert-Jan. Thanks, and we will. We have already quite a number of international participants at the Floriade Expo, and they are asking for it as well. And we have a lot of knowledge to share, as we could see today. Thanks again. Gideon, I would like to ask you to take the floor and kind of wrap up about our wonderful meeting today. And yeah, I hope you have seen that we have, we had some objectives for today. I think we did a good job, and we will do a good job in the upcoming years, definitely also with the Floriade programming. But the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, I made a lot of notes, but I think we are running out of time a little bit. So I need to keep it short. If I look at Wojtek, his presentation, I just have to think about how we are drowning in waste. That he made it really clear in the beginning of his presentation. And also that if we want to have circular cities, that we have to think about how we can innovate, modernize the real estate business, the construction sector. And to do that, I think municipalities, governments, they need to develop circular tender criteria, as Wojtek made clear. So it's all about the governance to make a start. And then Agnieszka, that was also quite surprising that the mood change was only visible in those lush parks, while the residential areas, there wasn't any change visible. So that, well, I made a conclusion that we need to redesign our residential areas as well. First governance, then design. And then Paola, about Pampus, and Ingrid, they really described about how we need to establish a kind of eco approach, how we can give form by using this underlying ecosystem with all its functions and processes for developing this new neighborhood in Almere, Pampus, but like many others, of course. And Ingrid also said we can't do it alone. We need everyone. In co-creation, it needs to happen. I would like to thank all the different speakers, Ingrid, Paola, Gert-Jan, Wojtek, Agnieszka, for providing these wonderful presentations. We have in the afternoon an inauguration speech, an installation speech for my professorship. I invite all the participants over here to join me. If you would like to join, please let me know after lunch, and I will put you on the list. Right now we have lunch and a kind of lunch walk. Just next to this building we have the new Aeres school building. It's very circular and green. It has green roofs, green facades, and circular systems in it. And we will provide a tour through the building, and you can join us in, I think, 5 or 10 minutes. So also on my behalf, thank you all, the people here in the audience, but also the digital ones, to participate in this morning session. And I wish you a nice day. Thank you.